And I think we're at a point where we may have just about everybody who is registered on the call. And if not, we'll just hear the doorbell ring them in as they're joining us. And this is awesome. And I think having everybody together like this is very much about why we created this program. So Peter mentioned before, I'm John Carfagno, and I have like the greatest job in the entire world in that I get to be the executive director of North Carolina's second oldest art museum. And we created this Cocktails with the Collection program partly because I really miss this aspect of the museum. Our mission statement is to bring people together and inspire creativity through the power of art. And with all that we've all been dealing with over the course of 2020 and now into 2021, uh, we miss these opportunities to have be together with friends, to enjoy a drink, and hopefully some of you made the cocktail that was the recommended drink for tonight's program.
We
The
didn't do it.
Stark and Stormy. If you do, cheers.
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 And not only does Peter like ginger beer, the Stark and Stormy is a little bit of a play on words with William Starkweather, an artist that we'll hear a little bit about as we dive into Peter's story and his rich history with our art museum. But before we do that, I have a few things that I need to do by way of table setting. First and foremost, I'm super pumped that everybody has their screens turned on. Like I said, it's supposed to feel like we're hanging out at HMA. And in my office, you can see I'm surrounded by some great art. This is not the Paul Whitener Gallery, where State of Line, Peter's exhibition, is currently installed. We moved these paintings out of the gallery into my office. And I do need to thank, though, the sponsors that have helped us to present Peter's exhibition in the Whitener Gallery. That's the Broyhill Foundation, the Beaver Foundation, and Vanguard Furniture. Those three funders have contributed now for the last consecutive 3 years to allow us to do great programs like the one we're going to celebrate tonight. And our annual sponsor is Alex Lee Incorporated, MDI, and Lowe's Foods. So we're always grateful for the big support that they give us, which again fuels all the exciting things that happen at HMA. We're gonna mute if you're not already muted, it's just until we get to the Q&A. But like I said, please keep your cameras on so that we can see one another and feel like we're enjoying this together. And I do need, before we jump in, on top of thanking Peter, which we will do multiple times tonight.
What?
You're muted, right?
Can't hear you.
Yes, she just muted me. I guess Christina did not. I guess Christina did not want to be thanked, but I'm going to do it anyway. Christina Anthony is our exhibitions manager. Her and Peter have such an enormous collaboration and such a great spirit between their partnership. We're so grateful for all that Christina has done for this exhibition and also for how she is producing tonight's event. So I think with that out of the way, the only other person that I wanted to be sure to recognize is our founding director, Paul Whitener. I mentioned that Peter's show is installed in the Whitener Gallery on the first floor. And really all of the Cocktails with the Collections programs we've done so far have tied back to Paul. In 1944, he had a vision that Hickory could have a great art museum. And with his creative talent as a great artist, his charm, and his magnetism, he was able to build, like I said, what has now become North Carolina's second oldest art museum. I always joke, Paul looked like a movie star, played football at Duke, and like I said, was incredibly charming and incredibly creative. So he set a standard that every museum director since has not been able to attain, me included. But we say that with the utmost respect and admiration for Paul. And we'll hear a little bit about how his spirit is reflected in Peter's relationship with the museum. So with that introduction out of the way, I'll start by saying I first met Peter about 6 months ago when Christine, our exhibitions manager, told me he was going to be visiting HMA to bring possible selections for his exhibition, State of Lyme. Right away, like you all, and I think there's so much laughter and so much excitement on this call already, I recognized that Peter was a very special person. On top of the fact that his manner of speech was very familiar to me, my dad grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, so Peter sounded like home right away. I was also blown away by his passion for great art and the transformative power of creativity that he brought to our museum. It was just so inspiring to me. But I am very much a newcomer in the story of Peter's connection to Hickory Museum of Art. So Peter, can you start by telling us a little bit about how we got to this point?
Sure. First, I'd like to say thank you for hosting. Thank you for having me at the museum. And the journey is an interesting one. I'd like to go from the latest to the earliest, so it makes a little sense. Sometime back in, I guess it was 2019, my friend Bob Curlin had told me probably 150 times every time we would meet that I've got to really try and get my work out there. That there was just, it really needed to be seen by more people. And I contacted Christina through the HMA website and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I am interested in exhibiting my work. And she said, well, the way it works is you submit work to us and the exhibition committee will review it and we'll get back to you. So that was about 2019. Probably January 2020, I get a response saying, we, the exhibition committee, have said yes to having an exhibition of your work. It would be in 2022. And that was fine. I understood it. It was a grand exhibition opportunity. I was going to have a retrospective. I thought that that was okay, but I wasn't really, wasn't sure that life would take me to 2022 in many ways. So Christina said, but I have a second option for you. And that is that we could have a smaller scale down exhibition. We have two galleries, both of which I knew, the Whitener Gallery and the Windows Gallery. And that if that would satisfy what I could do, would I be interested in that? And then the only catch, of course, and it's not a catch, it's that the museum says that in the Whitener Gallery, there must be some relationship to the museum. So now I say yes, and that's what you're seeing on the wall there, seeing this fabulous exhibition that Christina organized, set up, and John happened to be there the day that we had about 250 pieces laid out in a big area of the museum, trying to select what pieces would go where. Christina's genius is that she can see this. She's like the person that walks up to a piece of land and sees a house being built and knows exactly what everything is going to be looking like. I don't have that ability. She did. So then that's how that happens. Around 2013, there's a great exhibition that Hickory hosts because I asked them at that time as a curator of a collection that I have. And the curator of the collection that I have, well, that's two pieces that are in the current exhibition. And that's actually more pieces that are in the exhibition. But I asked them to house an exhibition, and this is me talking about the exhibition, during the exhibition. In their permanent collection, 80 of the books that I had collected that were illustrated by the artist, William E.B. Starkweather, and we'll get to the relationship with Starkweather in the museum. But here's a wonderful book that Emerson wrote. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a book called Friendship. And William Starkweather, who was an artist that is in the exhibition. And there's people examining this show. What we did is, this is at the very end of the show, we took it down and had people come and examine with magnifying glasses to see the actual hidden treasure. And of course, the title of the catalog was Hidden Treasure. because Starkweather did not want to be known as an illustrator, wanted to be known as a painter, and yet he needed to eat. So this, what you're seeing on your screen, the W at the top, the S at the bottom, the B backwards, the E backwards, William Edward Bloomfield Starkweather was hidden in his books. Here's a book he did for J.M. Barrie. Those of you that know Peter Pan, this is a prequel to Peter Pan, and if I can, right in the corner of between her foot and the dress is that WEBS. And he did that for Arthur Conan Doyle. You can see down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a different format that he used for the Emerson book. And of course, we know that the WS at the bottom is William Starkweather. We also know there's some other things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but Starkweather also did these wonderful inserts, these pine cone inserts, which take us full circle, I think, back to that particular exhibition. Going backwards again now, in 1989, I loaned to the Hickory Museum of Art a group of William Starkweather paintings. And that's the catalog from the exhibition. And that exhibition traveled to the St. John's Museum of Art. And I went to that exhibition. When I was at that exhibition, I had an opportunity to meet the co-patron, Mildred or Millie Coe. Millie was a wonderful lady who had the spirit and excitement of a person who loved art. And she was so happy to host this exhibition. Now, going back just slightly before that, in 1988, the first major exhibition since the 60s of Starkweather's work was in a place called the Lubsdorfer Gallery. And that was called the Travel Pictures. And that is where the whole organization of everything about the relationship with me and with the Hickory Museum of Art started, because in that exhibition, there was a giant loan. The loan was to find places that William Starkweather made paintings from: Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the San Diego Museum of Art, of course, the wonderful Hickory Museum of Art and their beautiful paintings of Starkweather. And so I got to meet the Hickory Museum in 1988 through this exhibition. In 1989, traveled there, of course, loaned them the paintings. And that gives you a quick relationship of my relationship to the museum and how I then, from 88 to today, have a relationship with the museum. I think that should be good. Now, the last time I had a one-person exhibition in a museum was in 1981. My mustache was a little, my mustache was a lot longer then.
Are you gonna grow it back?
Well, it must have been a COVID day too, because my hair wasn't cut. And yes, that is a painting that I haven't seen since 1981. It was bought by a woman who lived in a tiny town outside of Syracuse. This is my one-person show at the Everson Museum of Art, which was an I.M. Pei building, a beautiful building in Syracuse, New York. And they had a very large exhibition of my work. So that goes back to then. Let's see. I think we've covered all of the first question, John.
For sure, Peter. And I'm so grateful that you mentioned Mickey Coe, the museum's second director. Following Paul Whitener, our founding director's untimely death, Mickey, his wife, stepped forward to continue his dream and to build on the ambition and accomplishment of the early days of the museum. And I'm so grateful that you had the chance to meet her, Peter. And you have also had the chance, I think, to meet Starkweather, who you talked about before. And Starkweather is an important figure in the early days of the museum. In 1954, 10 years after our founding, he famously reached out to our first director, Paul Whitener. And in his correspondence, Starkweather expressed an interest in giving Paul 8 paintings out of his desire to make sure that his work would be placed where it would be seen, useful, and preserved. And we're so grateful that that connection happened, because those 8 paintings rank among our community's most beloved from the museum's holdings. So I'd be really curious, what was it like to meet Starkweather at an early age? Do you have any stories about what that was like?
Well, yeah, I can tell you that it's like meeting me now. If a kid meets me now that's 13 years old, I'm just an old man. I remember I would go on Saturdays to where my father worked. He was an art appraiser, he was an auctioneer, and a private collector of art. And on Saturdays we'd meet and he would invite someone to lunch. So the 3 of us would have a dialogue that was rather interesting. 1962, we're in Smith's Diner, and that's on University Place, Manhattan. And they were talking art. And at 13 years old, I might have liked art, but it was just a conversation. I wanted to eat. However, I did find out that Mr. Starkweather's work at that very time was being featured in a centennial exhibition in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And his work was always of distinction, that people really, the Met had his work in a collection for a long time. The Brooklyn Museum brought his work out for another major exhibition. And, but I remember Starkweather was dedicated, was passionate, but I don't really, it's not like a great moment of change in my life. I've had people change my lives by being with them, but it was just kind of being able to go to lunch with an artist and my father. He typically did that. He did that several times. He did that with different artists that he knew that either he was going to buy their work, and in this case, he went to a gallery show of William Starkweather's work in 1962, and he bought a bunch of his work. That's the start of my collection. When my dad died in 1968, it became mine. And from 68 on, I continued collecting his work until I had the largest collection. And enjoyed having his work and collecting it. So if that helps us, yes, that's my relationship to Starkweather.
For sure. And, that occurred at an early age. I doubt the mustache had come in at that point when you were having lunch together. But I think that based on other interviews that I've heard and what I know about your career and your trajectory as a creative person, that even at an early age, people had recognized that you were likely an artist. And can you tell us more about that?
Well, that's the Brooklyn Bridge, and yet that's in your collection. That was in my collection. I donated that painting. We're catching up, I think, with some of Starkweather's work. And that's a piece that I did when I was in 3rd grade. That's a foil repoussé. That was a gift to my dad for Father's Day that then my aunt kept in a collection of her work of mine until she passed away, and then it was given back to me. I had not seen it since 3rd grade. I really didn't know it existed. But if you look at that piece, you could see the lines, you could see the detail, the tiny little dots. There's a lot of work there that I see in my work today. And of interest in that case, that being 3rd grade, I get to junior high school and I still have an interest. In fact, my interest grew in junior high school because I needed to have a place to feel I was welcomed and a place to feel that I could be something. And in junior high school, Mr. Putterman, Eugene Putterman, would always give me art supplies, and he would give me art supplies to take home. In fact, I don't have them right here, but I do have them upstairs. I still have some of the things he gave me, 2 brushes from the Board of Education of New York at junior high school 227. When I got to high school, again, I was fortunate enough to be selected to go to a special museum. Now that man right there is Salvatore Dali. In 1966, I went to the Huntington Hartford Museum on Columbus Circle in Manhattan. And I saw the Dali and the Pavel Chelichev exhibition owned by Huntington Hartford in a private session with a few other kids from New York who were selected to go. And it was one of the changing moments. I got to see great art, great people. And those are the kinds of things that do make a big difference in your life. So thank you for highlighting my elementary, middle school, and high school years. Let's see. I think that would really kind of sum up that whole early part of my life. It doesn't, I think it gets better as we go on,
Without question. I always think it's so interesting to hear about these formative experiences from, lunch with an internationally celebrated artist to having the opportunity to experience great art in a museum and to see the origins of your interest in line work. And now I, as the director of the museum, get the pleasure of sharing your exhibition with countless groups. I mean, I have given more tours of your exhibition. I think the reopening has people eager to be back in the galleries and being inspired by great work. And when I bring people into your galleries, it just seems like the joy that you derive from the creative process. And I've heard you describe this to me, and I try to summarize it when or to repeat it when I'm leading these tours, but it's like an intense physical, intellectual, and even spiritual engagement that comes across in your work. And people are really, really fascinated by it. And, we believe as a 21st century museum that our exhibitions have the power to inspire people to be more creative, to get out in the world and make a difference by connecting with their power to do things that they didn't think they could do. And your exhibition just represents that to them. And like I said, I've heard you talk a little bit about the process and the state that it brings you to, but I think there's nothing quite like hearing from the artists. And if you could tell us a little bit about the continuous line drawings. I have my favorite one in the exhibition is this one right behind me. And it's where I start every tour of Peter's exhibition. If you could tell us a little bit about the continuous line drawings and how they are created, I think everybody will benefit from that.
Yeah.
And then hopefully give it a chance, give it a try themselves.
So I consider myself a line artist, and because of the times and because of conditions, everyone asks me all the time, so what do you make? So what do you do? I make lines, and that doesn't really, so I created this term called vonal. Vonal is Hungarian for line, and I'm a vonalist. And my movement is the vonalism. But on the screen, you should begin to see a piece that has both a beginning in the upper, kind of like upper left area, is a straight line. And then down over on the right side column, you see the ending line. Now, when you see that, that is done with a technical pen. And there's two pens that I use. One is called Stadler and one is called Rapidograph. I interchanged those pens. And basically, it's a tiny little needle that has ink inside of a well. And ink would be, I place ink in here and I'll work in that position like that. Has to be worked at a 90 degree to the plane. And if you look at that piece right there on the screen, you'll see that I try to make equidistant lines. When I'm working with that pen down in that position, I'm working in a way that I'm always cognizant of the total piece, the part that I'm working on, and the area I need to go to, because that beginning line has to end in one line. Now that piece that you see on your screen that Christina is fortunately showing you is this piece right here that I just finished for this little session. It's called Conjunction 2020. Now, conjunctions used to be, to me, different than what they are now. Conjunction is where the moon and two planets aligned. And if you know me, you know that a lot of the kinds of ways I work have to do with things that affect me. And this, I'm going to bring it really close so you can see that piece that you have there. That's the piece now that I will then put ink into the center areas. And an example might be to show you, okay, now that's a test strip. What you're seeing there is I do two tests. I test the black line to make sure that when I'm working, it's identical, because I can't do them in one setting. It takes 100 hours. So, you know, there's some times that I will stop and eat and go to the bathroom and then go back to work again. But the black line, I have to make sure is as thick as I need it to be and not thicker, and it is consistent and not gloppy. What you see in the above area, and by the way, I'll show you that right there, is that are tests that I'm doing to test the ink that I use. And the ink that I use, okay, I'm using an ink that's called Iro Shizuku. They're handmade bottles. Ink is handmade in Japan. It's a very special ink. It's typically used for pens that people have that are of some wealth. I found those, and by the way, that's a sampling, that's this here. What it is if you see in the upper left-hand corner, kujaku, or just below that, ajisai, or some of the other words that are on the screen, like konpeki and chuchi, those words, including Florence red and turquoise, are the inks on the paper in a black line that I've created to see what the vibrancy would be when I make it on a full piece. So I do a selection. Then I typically do small pieces. I do pieces that are about 7 by 8 inches and test out what it'll be to make a larger piece. Here's a piece that I just finished the other day, and that is 2 continuous lines here, 2 continuous lines there, and you can't see it, but there's 2 different colors, and that's why there's only 4 continuous lines in that entire piece. So this entire piece has only 4, and there it is. So I cheated a little bit, and I sent slides in ahead to show you this piece as it was being developed, as I was filling it in. So you get an animation effect of the way I worked and the hours I put into that piece. The excitement for me, John, you say intellectual and creative. I enjoy what I do. I am very passionate about what I do. I don't know how to be anything but. I don't know how to be normal. That's the best word that I could use.
See, the term we use is innovative.
Okay.
Not normal is certainly innovative. And I think that the lifestyle that comes with the degree of engagement and the intensity of your practice in this is really what gets me so excited. And I've heard you describe before, you lose track of time and that you become completely immersed. Can you tell us a little bit about what it feels like to make one of these?
Well, I need to know in advance what my parameters are, you know, what the medium is going to be, which is the pen and the ink. And I need to know what size paper. I need to know as a drawing, very, very little drawing is done. Just in this case, there was only a line around the edge of the orange edge, nothing else. Everything else was totally free. So that was the only piece. And then after that, once I start working, whether it be the black line that is just black line, or, excuse me, this is upside down, or once they're completely filled in, I do lose track of time. I have no sense of time. Time is not something that I can understand when I'm working. And as an interesting thing, I don't know time when I'm not working either. Barbara, my wife, will tell you that I have no sense of time. I really don't. It's just a weird thing, but that's part of my work. My desire to be, the compulsivity that I have has been very rewarding for me. Some people would, want to be like in yoga or shiatsu, or some people want to do some kind of a walking activity, or a runner. A runner can describe what I do, where you push and you push and you push and you get to a state where you haven't been, and then you don't realize. That's the way I work. I get myself into a location and I work, and then it is my passion. And it is something also that I must say, I cannot work loosely. For those people that have known me for years, I work as if I were a surgeon needing surgical environment. It has to be brushed down and clear of air dirt, air dirt from our filters that just push slight amounts of dirt. I clean these pieces. I have special brushes before I work to make sure that the air is free of it. I work in an environment that is as clean as possibly can be. I can't put this needle down at all unless that surface is prepared for me. I hope that answers what part or all of your question.
It certainly does. And I think that the term I've heard you use before is not OCD, but rather than OCH.
Okay.
Obsessive compulsive happy. I've heard you say that before.
Well, many people have said I'm OCD, and I disappointingly have to say to them, no, OCH. But really, I'm hypervigilant. I think if you if you have to put me in a category as an artist, I would rather be called a vonalist for these lines. But if you have to put me in a category as a human being, I am OCH. I really have that happiness factor, not OCD. But I think it's a good factor for me anyway. For other people, maybe I'm annoying, but to me, it calms me down. It centers me. It brings me tremendous pleasure. I make art as a result of it. I've made art now on a serious level for, well, certainly since 1968, when I had my first exhibition. I've been working ever since very, very passionately. And as some people know, I could fill a third of a house with my art. I have tons of art. I make it and I make it and I make it. And I enjoy making it.
Well, I can tell you, having been there the day that you brought the possible selections for this exhibition, there was a lot, and the hardest part was picking what to include in the show because it was all so good.
And that was only a few years' work. It's not a retrospective. If we had to go to a retrospective, it would be a whole different thing. I'd go into my archives and I'd go into the archives. I'd actually have to have, there's some people on right now. In fact, one of the people on right now has the largest Palatico painting that I know of. There were others, but I don't know where they are. But there is one person who is on right now. And so maybe before we finish, we could look at her piece. It's very large.
Is it a vonalist work?
Well, it's a combination of vonalism. In fact, behind me right there is a vonalist piece behind that door, a very large piece. And it was only extensively, interestingly, on the screen is yellow right now. I rarely work in yellow. I've only 3 times worked in gold. And that piece there is probably the first time I really did a substantial piece in yellow. So yeah, they're vonal pieces. I do other things though, John. I don't have them with me here to show you. I do,
Well, we're fortunate to have some of them.
We have Christina helps helping us. And so these pieces, I won't tell you the story as to why I call these abelito at this point, but they are embossings, and I both enjoy making embossings because I have my own press that was given to me by some of the people who are in this very meeting right now as a retirement present when I retired. That's another embossing, but that's an embellished embossing. And that one, the embellished embossings, I called them Gaffratura Abelito. And the embellishings were something that I felt were needed in some of the pieces. Some of the pieces stand alone. They really don't need to be embellished. That first piece, I will never embellish. It's just the dynamics, that piece in particular. I look at composition. Composition is important to me. The dynamic of the interplay between my subject and my background is always important to me. Or some people call it figure field. But there's an interplay there of positive and negative space. There's an interplay of what maybe some people have called, and again, people need to call things something. So they'll call those staples or backward C's. But there's an interplay of these spaces that are in that piece that I really enjoy looking for and finding in my work. Tension and open space and closed space.
Yeah, Peter, that's so interesting. I saw magnets, and I think magnets have a connection to positive and negative space, but that was what I saw.
Okay.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that is perfect the way that it is.
Yeah, I'm open to interpretation. There's a woman that's in this session right now who called my piece The Swimmer. And when Marianne called my piece The Swimmer, from then on, it was called The Swimmer. This is a piece that has made transformations. I've started out by saying this piece will never have any embellishment. And then one day I took a piece, it wasn't perfect. It hadn't been printed to my standards. And I didn't want to ever show it. So I said, well, let me play with it. And I started putting in a background. And I now feel that this piece can have backgrounds. And I've done maybe 7 or 8 different versions of this background with that particular embossing. So there are times when I do them, and there are times when I feel no. The purity of the whiteness of the page or the grayness of the paper. The paper is important. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I work in 3 different types of papers. I work, when we're doing the Vonal paintings, I now use the Artistico from Fabriano. It's an Italian paper. I find that to have just the right qualities that I'm looking for. And that the pen has the chance to be able to place the ink down in a beautiful flow. And to me, the ink has to flow. I can't push it. The ink has to be able to move somewhat like a Ouija board, because there are many moments where I don't know where it's going to go. I do know that I have to catch it at times and not to go where it touches, because I need that space. Now, in this particular piece was done on German paper, and it's Hanne Müller paper. And I used German paper for a long time. I found this Honeymuller to really wonderfully allow an embossing. And I have used Reeves, and in early days Archers, but Reeves paper, if it's soaked for 2 hours and then blotted dry quickly and put into the press, it will give a decent embossing. But the embossings are, have to be a certain height for me to accept them. I hope that helps.
It certainly does. And I know you use relatively simple materials, correct, to achieve that effect.
Okay, so that's the one thing, and I'm sorry to say that in the embossings, I make a plate or template. And I'm using now a non-toxic method in my work. Everything has to be non-toxic. That's a particular plate that you see that was a cousin of mine had a ranch, and she would send me skulls, and that's a cow skull. And that's my interpretation of the cow skull and the embossing. And then, of course, there's the embellishments in the background to that piece. So it's really relatively simple. In that total piece, there's a plate that I printed from, and then there's, and those inks are different. Those are Akua inks, A-K-U-A. They are Japanese. And the reason why I had to use Akua ink is because on most papers that are printmaker papers, you really have to have something that will show and stay true to its color. And I experiment all the time. I'm buying material. Material is something that I need to buy at people's advice, or and then see if it will fit. Some do and some doesn't, but those do. Taking the stage too long, I think.
Well, but Peter, I do want to be sure that people have a chance. We've already gotten one question in the chat, and I know part of the joy of this format is that we do have an opportunity to interact with one another.
Yes.
So I think we may jump ahead a little bit. You alluded to this a few times throughout the talk, but I know that there are some teachers that have been particularly influential to you, and I know Christina has some examples that are pretty striking. And I think that that is another interesting aspect of your creative life, is that those relationships and what they've meant to you. I think this is a great example of somebody who had an amazing career who you had the privilege to learn from.
Well, that's Robert Motherwell's work. And Robert Motherwell was the chairman before I got to Hunter College. And shortly thereafter, Eugene Goosen had him back for a lecture, and I attended his lecture. And Motherwell's work is very unusual, but his passion for art was phenomenal. And I think I was in a school at Hunter College, which is 695 Park Avenue, where the environment was so challenging. Goosen, for example, allowed me to put up wall murals in his office. So I was able to have, in fact, throughout Hunter College at the time, I had murals throughout the building. From the basement area where you came in off the subway, I had a mural right off the subway on Lexington Avenue, all the way up to the 16th floor, and that I had a piece in the Graduate Center. Never was a graduate student there, and I had a mural there for over 25 years, maybe 30 years. I had a mural up there. Another man who influenced my work. I had to apply to be in the Bachelor of Fine Arts program at Hunter College. Very few people got in. And a man named Tony Smith, this is a Tony Smith sculpture. Smith was a very unique human being in the art field at the time. And my association with him was that he was my advisor. He brought me in. He gave me a full studio. Because of him giving me a studio and because of my relationship with him, I met other professors at different levels. I was not just a student at that time. I was with people who were gods in the art world. And I was just so excited. I met a man named Bob Hewitt. Bob Hewitt was one of the founders of Soho. His work was in one of the founding galleries, Paula Cooper Gallery down in Soho. There was no Soho. It didn't exist in those days, in the 60s. Soho was a term someone else made for it. Like I make vonalism. Hopefully someday people will call me a vonalist. And here's another one. I went to Cooper Union. It's a few blocks from where I was raised in the 6th Street and 2nd Avenue. Cooper Union was right over there. That's Buckminster Fuller. Bucky was there giving a lecture about his geometric domes and the way his structures would work. Little did I know that I would travel to Montreal to see one of his giant domes, which then a few years later burned down. But I was influenced by people like this who were there. Another woman who totally blew me away, Alice Neal, a WPA artist who was ostracized for the work that she did. Ostracized, I thought that was a self-portrait at first, but now I realized that's Alice Neal. And it is her work. She was never given the proper standing in the art world. 1, because she was a woman. 2, because she did things that people did not like. She did, older women's work and children without clothes on and gay people. She was ostracized because she was doing what wasn't popular, what wasn't acceptable. And she said, I don't care. And because of people like Alice Neal or Motherwell or Hewitt, I feel the same way about my work. I don't care. I work because I love it. And I don't care what someone does. Now, am I ecstatic that Hickory has my work up? Yes. Am I appreciative? Yes. Am I appreciative that Christina hung it in a way? Yes. And here's a future vonalist. I'm certain that these 2 young men one day will make me happy when they stand up and put their work up in a museum, because I know one of them is a vonalist. I know that because one of them made me, actually I'm holding it, well, he's gonna yell at me, I'm sure, made me a piece based on the piece that you like and gave it to me. Now, how much more flattery is when you have someone who wants to work like you do. And if I understand correctly, his father has made a statement about him. Maybe you might want to tell me a little bit about what his father said.
Well, the artist of that work, Peter, is actually on this call, and I know that he's very excited that you shared his work with this group. That's my son, Thomas. And my son, Thomas, is a lot like Peter. He's a passionate guy. He's an energetic guy, and he's certainly a very creative guy. And when he gets engaged with his vonalism, he is locked in on it. And it's something that brings him enormous joy. And he has shared it with his classmates. I think I told Peter, after he made the first one that he showed me based on this drawing right here, his classmates saw what he was doing, and he ended up getting an order. He was commissioned to do 8 more. And he is fulfilling that commission, and he's doing it with great enthusiasm, and talks all the time about making a Peter Falotico. And so, Peter, your passion and all that you bring to the work and continues to inspire, and we're so grateful for that.
Well, happy to do that. It's I have 2 worlds that I've lived in. One was as an educator, and the other one has been an artist. Maybe third as a husband. I'm in that world as well. But the world of education is something that we really, it changes our world. It changed my world. You saw the piece I did in 3rd grade, and you see what I'm doing now at 72. And I am really, the work shows so well. I need to give Christina Anthony credit. I never would put those works together. The way she's putting them together in this exhibition, I could not do. I would not do. And now I'm so happy that she did it. she makes relational things happen, which I could not see. It's really amazing. And so I really thank the museum, you, and of course, Christina. On that piece, the piece on our right, it was done as a result of me going to Italy with my wife, Barbara, and being blown away by work in all of Europe, but certainly when we were in Venice and Florence. And this piece was a kind of an homage to two people. The blue color is a Venetian ink that I was able to get from there and bring home without breaking the bottle, without losing it. The piece on the other side is a piece that people have called bugs, which is somewhat of they look like bugs, but it's also a piece that I see something going on there, but the piece that we're looking at on the right is a relief, and the piece on the left is a relief. Both of them are embellished embossments. I won't say any more about that. I'm looking at the time and realizing, my goodness, there's no time.
Peter, I could do this all night, and I know our audience could as well. But I did want to ask one more question before we open up the floor, and that is, what is next for Peter Falotico? You can see his work through the end of January here at HMA, and if you're able to get here, please do, because there's no substitute for being in the galleries. But what comes after this show?
Okay, so and that piece that you're seeing right now on the screen is not really, the colors aren't really good, but that's Pontormo's piece. I did that in homage to Pontormo. The piece on the right is a series for Hugo, a Swiss young man that has inspired me to make pieces. But what you're asking for next, I have the desire to have a retrospective. I would love to bring work from the 60s through whatever year I get the retrospective out. These are very recent pieces that you're seeing, and I have work that very few people have seen, that I really think to see it as a retrospective and to see the changes, when I used airbrush, when I used silkscreen, when I used etching, actually where I was working with plates and making acid bath etchings. Some of those pieces, very few people have ever seen those pieces. I made probably 300 etchings and printed series of them. I have, I did very realistic drawings. I've worked in computer art in the early days of computers. I was working with computer art. So there's a wonderful opportunity for me someday, somewhere. Now, where I don't know, you certainly might be able to help me with a direction of who might know. You know a lot of people in your field. I don't, but that would be what my hope would be.
Well, certainly, as I think about your creative life and what you have shared today, there are a few things that stand out. One would be the passion for what you're doing. You had said that Motherwell shared that with you, and it certainly comes across in every interaction that we have with you. It's communicated through the art, and I think that the precision that you bring to the art, on top of the engagement and deep connection that you feel to the work. I think another thing that stands out to me is your comfort level with experimentation. You mentioned 4 or 5 different mediums, different types of papers that you use, things that you try out in the studio, using the different inks, the different colors. And then what I really love about you, Peter, is your openness, your willingness to learn from and with others and inspire people to do that. So I think there is an awful lot that would be communicated in that retrospective. And I look forward to talking more about where that might be and how HMA may be able to help with that.
Wonderful.
So I do want to be sure to allow people, we've already gotten one question in the chat. Meredith Gibson asked, do you make negative space as you go along, or do you line out the negative space?
Okay, there's two ways of making negative space. Let me give you an example of that. Best by showing you two pieces. There's two types of negative space in this. The major white area, I pre-plan exactly where that's going to be, and I work around it. But when you get really close to this piece, the white spaces are also negative space, but could be considered positive space. It's almost like an Escher, where there's figure and there's field, and you decide what's negative and what's positive. But that's a great question. This piece, this very next piece that I'll be working the ink color into, you can see that I know already the major negative spaces, and I've pre-inked. Just finished this one. So, but this one has a different format. I'm working in a format that's left to right. And many of my pieces, I don't work left to right. And some of my pieces, I work voluminously, where I create that effect of roundness. I don't know if that helps answer the question. Any other questions?
Well, it looks to me like there's another one coming in. I know animation is in your history as an artist. Have you time-lapse videotapes one of your Vonal pieces? Wow, I would love to see its evolution. I think we all would.
Yeah. The last two pieces that I did, I've taken photographs of them from start to finish. And there's a component of the phone when you're looking at a group of photos, you can make them into a slideshow. And so I'm able to now, for the first time, I've never done it before, but with the last two pieces, this piece that those two pieces I just showed you, I'm making animations from it. And yes, I went to the New School for Social Research. I have a master's in film and video. I was an animator. Some people here, skunks that they are, I think are revealing that I do have a background in animation and knew a lot of animators. I see the woman at the bottom screen there, Pam Waldrop. She knows that I was a animator, yes.
Will we be able to see those online anywhere soon?
All right, my arm has been twisted. Yeah, I don't, yes. You see, I will do that for you because you've done something very important for me. I will gladly do that. I'm not an animator anymore. At 72, I'm a vonalist. I'm a line maker. I make lines. I'm a embosser. Animation is wonderful. It's exciting. I can tell you 10 animators that Pam Waldrop knows that I brought to her attention. I've seen some phenomenal animation made. And while I was at the new school, I was able to be with a great deal of animators. But it's a very difficult medium. I work slow, animators work minus slow. So it takes more time. But yes, I'll gladly make one or two of these pieces into animation. Another question.
Wonderful. It looks like one has come in. Halfway at least, I'm going to try to build this out. It says, the patience your work requires is obvious. How long does, I'm going to assume it's how long does it take for you to create a vonalist piece? Okay. There's a woman on right now. Her name is Andrea. She's on my screen. She's on the right column, 3 down. This is Celebrity Squares. She has the largest piece that I have out of my collection right now. And that has 3 qualities to it. There's airbrush, which I worked with extensively in the 80s. It also has
Vonalism, those two panels are one continuous line. And in addition to that, there is a gouache. I used to do a lot of gouache painting. And so that particular piece that she has there, even though it looks as though it's 3D, for a long time, I thought that I needed to make my work look three-dimensional. There's a woman in the column on the left named Barbara Falotico, who says her name is Peter Falotico, but I know it's not. Behind her shoulder is another piece that has that quality also of that three-dimensionality. And that was done with serigraphy or serigraph. Now we can't get it, it's okay. So other questions?
We got one in the chat.
There it is.
A lot of pinpoint dots in some of your work, even though they don't combine to form a realistic subject. Do you consider your use pointillist? I know we talked a little bit about.
So something's happening to someone's microphone right now. I don't know what it is, but John, I think your microphone maybe, I couldn't hear the question, John, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll try again. The question is around pointillism. And one of our participants asked, I see a lot of pinpoint dots in your work, even though they don't combine to form a realistic subject. Do you consider this a form of pointillism?
Well, I actually do pointillistic pieces. There are, I have a whole body of work, some of which is in that exhibition right now in State of Line, that are pointillist pieces. I also use color-aid paper interchangeably. Piece behind John's shoulder that seems to be pinkish has in it a piece of color-aid paper. There's, in the museum right now, there are several pieces that are truly pointillistic. And I work two ways with pointillism. I work with ink or I work with Prismacolor pencils. Both of which allow me now. We go back to State of Line. Yeah, there. There's a great example of, let's stay with that one. The very piece in the center, which is an homage to Picasso, and it's only an homage to Picasso is because my wife and I went to the Picasso Museum. We saw his work in the museum. I came home and needed to pay homage to him. A lot of my work is homage to Joseph Albers. Before the night ends, I need to credit Joseph and Annie Albers, who I never met, whose book I bought when I was in college, Interaction of Colors, absolutely changed my life, and that many of my pieces are simplified because Albers dedicated his life to homage to the square, or homage to the square, depending on how you pronounce it. I'm from Brooklyn, it's homage. Sorry about that, folks. But if you think in terms of the simplicity of my pieces, most of them is because I felt the freedom that Albers, Joseph Albers, allowed people to have by looking in terms of the simplicity of a single rectangle on a rectangle. And that gave me the courage to do the kinds of pieces that I do today.
Well, I picked up on that. I mean, your sense of design is so accomplished. And I thought of Albers immediately. So I'm so glad that you brought him up. And I think we have time for one more question. And I think one we'll do is Pamela would like to ask Peter about the piece that she has. Pamela, is that work on screen right now?
Yeah, no, it looks to me like that piece was done, yeah. That piece was in the Everson Museum of Art in 1981. It was probably done in 1977, maybe 76. It was when I was working both large scale line and small scale line and putting them together. I haven't worked like that in, since the 80s. That was 70s work. Yes, that's I did probably about 50 or 60 pieces. I don't think I own one like that. They were all purchased out of the Everson Museum. So that's, you hold on to that, pal. That's a nice piece.
Peter, Pamela is motioning that you can't have it back, that she's holding on to it. The work certainly has a great provenance and great history, being included in that big show at the Everson Museum.
Yeah.
And I think we'll do one more. One of our museum members, Priscilla Carney, who is a great fan of HMA, has asked, would the animation be part of the retrospective that you'd like to have?
I'll have 5 animations if I get a retrospective. I can hear my wife in a room sealed off in another part of the house laughing, you know. Yeah, the thing is, yes, absolutely. I'll work with someone or I'll work alone. I have cameras. I have very good cameras to make animation. And so I will do that. I don't have an animation stand anymore. I donated that animation stand to a school district I had worked in many years ago. But I used to have animation equipment. And yes, I believe that I can very well accomplish that. Yes, that's as simple as. Any other questions? Come on. Alan always asks questions of me all the time. He's not asking a question today. I mean, people ask questions of me all the time. No?
I do want to be sure. I'm watching in the chat and I don't see Alan's question, but I do want to be sure. But before we wrap up, number one, to raise our Stark and Stormies to Peter Falotico.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll drink to you as well. And
we cannot forget his great partner in life and creativity, Barbara, who we can see on the screen.
Thank you. If we end simply by saying that without Barbara, there would be no exhibition, there would be no art, there would be no Peter.
And how thankful we are to Barbara for that, and Peter, to you for this night of creative inspiration. I think we are all ready to go back out in the world and exercise our passion, our precision, our engagement, and our willingness to try new things because of you. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you, John, and I appreciate it. And Christina, thank you